All right, now let me show you something interesting. So I'm going to define a new object like person and set its name to Mosh. Let's log it on the console. Person. So here's our person object, and in its prototype, we have all these methods available. So we can type person.toString and it works. However, if we iterate over the members of this object, we're not going to see this method toString. So a for loop, let key in person. Let's just log the key on the console. Save. So the only key we have here is name. None of the properties and methods defined in object base are visible here. By the same token, if we call object.keys of person and then log it on the console, again, we only see the name property. So how come we can't iterate over all these properties and methods defined in object base? Well, the reason is because in JavaScript, our properties have attributes attached to them. Sometimes these attributes prevent a property from being enumerated. Let me show you what I mean. So first, let's get the prototype for person. We call object.getPrototype of person. So this is our object base, right? Now I want to show you the attributes attached to the toString property, or more accurately, toString method. So we call object.getOwnPropertyDescriptor. So as the first argument, we pass object base. As the second argument, we pass the name of the target property or method, that is toString. And this will return an object which we call a property descriptor. Let me show you. So let's store that in descriptor. So now let's log this descriptor on the console. Okay. So here's our descriptor object. Look at the properties. Configurable is true. That means we can delete this member if we want to. Enumerable is false. And that's why when we iterated over our person object, we couldn't see the toString method. We also have writable set to true, which means we can overwrite this method. We can change its implementation. We can set its value. And here's the value property, which is set to a method. And this is where we have the default implementation of the toString method. Now, when you create your own objects, you can set these attributes for your properties. Let me show you an example. So we're going to use our person object. We don't need these lines anymore. Earlier in the last section, you learned about object.defineProperty method. We use this to define a getter and a setter for a property. So as the first argument, we pass person. The second argument is the name of the target property, which is name. And the third argument is an object, which is our property descriptor object. This is where we add the attributes to this property. So in the last section, we used get and set to define a getter and a setter. Now we're going to use different set of properties. So I can set this to writable, false, and this will become read-only. So if I set person.name to, let's say, John, and then log it on the console, okay, look, the name is not changed. So that's the writable attribute. We have another attribute, enumerable. We can set this to false, and then this will not show up in object.keys. So if we log object.keys of person, look, now we get an empty array. In contrast, if it was true, it will show up here. So by default, all these attributes are true. All properties are writable, enumerable, and configurable. So let's see what happens if we set configurable to false. Now we cannot delete this property. So if I try to delete person.name, nothing will happen. So let's log the person on the console. look, the name property is still there.